You ever feel overwhelmed by the rock pile? That clip's from a film called The Last Castle. Robert Redford plays a decorated general who gets thrown into a military prison where they attempt to break him, make him move a pile of rocks, literally and figuratively, that seem too much. But it doesn't work. It actually invigorates him, helps him rediscover who he is, and vaults him to the next level of excellence. Well, how do you handle it when you're staring at the rock pile? I want you to read with me James chapter 1, beginning with verse 2. It says this, "Dear brothers and sisters, whenever trouble comes your way, let it be an opportunity for joy. For when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be strong in character and ready for anything. God blesses the people who patiently endure testing. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love Him." When trouble comes your way, let it be an opportunity for joy. I mean, even optimists sometimes struggle when they read James' words. How do you pull that off unless you're like Mr. Rogers? How in the world do you do it? Well, James says it's ultimately a question of attitude. Tim Hansel wrote a great book about problem solving called Eating Problems for Breakfast, in which he says it's interesting to note that when you ask the average person in our culture today, no matter how educated, what's your approach to problem solving, they will blink and say, I don't know. Hansel says this probably is the most important life skill we can teach, and most people don't have a clue on how to operate in it. At one point he writes these words, "The first and perhaps most important component of the problem-solving process is attitude." That's what my research says. Your attitude is the key. It is the absolute core in your effort to solve problems. I cannot overestimate how important this is. Some experts believe that 90% of all problem solving revolves squarely around attitude. That's what James says. So, when trouble comes your way, you're supposed to consider it an opportunity for joy. Well, this morning I want to talk about how do you develop those attitudes that allow you to move the rock pile in your life without getting crushed by it. However, as I try and point out this morning, 3 different attitudes that the Bible and wisdom talk about for approaching problem solving, I want you to know they're not all equal. They, to some degree, build on one another. 3 levels of response to life's problems. The first response level is survival. Survive. And the attitude required to survive is persistence. That's why the cockroach is a pretty darn good icon for this attitude. I've read a lot about this recently. I know a lot about cockroaches. Probably can't share it all this morning, so if some of you would like to come afterwards and find out some stuff about cockroaches, see me. But see, the cockroach is the ultimate picture, genetically speaking, of endurance, persistent. Some people say they've existed for 400 million years. Today we have somewhere between 4,000 and 7,500 species of cockroaches. So step on all you want. There's plenty left. We have tried for thousands of years to get rid of cockroaches, and they continue to grow in population. Reason? They are unbelievably adaptable. They are survivors. They have this ability to figure out what changes in their environment and adapt to it. It's gotten them through the Ice Age. It's gotten them to outlive the dinosaurs. It made it through the Industrial Revolution. It's allowed them to persevere through MTV. I Are you aware that roaches can even survive for about a week if you cut their head off? Not that I'm suggesting you go home and try funky, weird experiments here, but it's because they only drink through their heads. Apparently, IQ's not an issue. But if you cut a roach's head off, it'll still function for a week. It's that adaptable. Even after humanity's best repellent shots, roaches survive. Charles Darwin was best known for his theory of evolution, certainly coming under some severe fire nowadays. But one of the aspects of his understanding, which isn't coming under fire, is his idea of the survival of the fittest. Darwin posited that species, at least within themselves, adapt over time and change through a process he called natural selection. The example that Darwin used to use was the white moth, common to Great Britain. Darwin said their natural predator were birds that had a difficult time identifying them against the sky because their white blended in with the clouds. However, after the Industrial Revolution, soot began to discolor the sky, and the whiter the moth was, the more easily it was preyed upon. And so it adapted. Natural selection. The whitest moths were eaten first. Over time, as a result, they began to select as a breed. The darker moths began to survive. To the point that Darwin says even a generation later, we didn't have the white moth anymore. We had the gray moth in Great Britain. It adapted. Survivors don't let problems beat them. They adapt. And by the way, this may be the hardest part of this whole deal. You may know this, but the hardest part of this first level, surviving through problems, is adapting to reality, because most of us, if the counselors are correct, spend our lives in denial of reality. The beginning stage to surviving problems is adapting to reality. Sir Winston Churchill was a survivor, also maybe one of history's greatest orators. On October 29, 1941, he addressed schoolboys at a graduation ceremony in London in the midst of some of history's thorniest problems. His speech, I'll quote to you now. The great orator stood before that graduating class and spoke these words: "Never give in. Never give in. Never, 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 never. In nothing great or small, large or petty, never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense." Never give in. He sat down. You see, he didn't need to say anything else, because Winston Churchill was the icon of endurance and persistence, who refused to back down. That's the beginning point. If you want to survive problems in your life, you have to accept the reality of them